When I accidentally glanced at my mother-in-law's bank account, the number that appeared left me stunned, over $450 million. I quietly thought, now she has everything. My existence no longer matters. A few weeks later, while I was still reeling from the pain of losing my kind mother-in-law, my wife approached me, calm as if nothing had happened, and dropped a cold statement: she wanted a divorce. It turned out, the moment the $450 million inheritance was transferred to her name, she revealed her true self behind the gentle facade she'd maintained all along. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. I was speechless, as if someone had stabbed me in the chest. "What did you say?" I asked, my voice faltering. Emily smirked, tossing her blonde hair back. "You heard me. I don't need you anymore." Her words cut like a knife. I looked into Emily's eyes, searching for the woman who once comforted me after the death of Sarah, my first wife. But all I saw was brazenness. "Are you serious?" I asked, my voice trembling with anger. "Dead serious," Emily replied, tossing a stack of papers onto the table. A divorce petition, already prepared, as if she'd been planning it for ages. "You were just an ATM to me. From the start, I was after your money. Sarah's inheritance, then my mother's fortune. I waited for her to die to kick you out. Sign it, don't make a fuss." I clenched my fists, my blood boiling. Margaret's image flashed in my mind, the woman who taught me about responsibility. She didn't deserve to be turned into a tool by her daughter. "You dare talk about your mother like that?" I growled, stepping forward. Emily shrugged, sneering. "Don't act all righteous. My mother left me $450 million. It's all mine. What do you have? A mediocre salesman? Sign the papers and get out." Rage made me want to wipe that smile off her face, but Margaret's words echoed. "Stay calm." I took a deep breath, suppressing my anger. "Fine," I said, my voice ice cold. I grabbed the divorce papers, scribbled my signature and threw them back at Emily. "Done. You're on your own." Emily smirked, satisfied. "You. Thanks for being reasonable. Take all our joint savings. I don't need them. $450 million is enough for me. Get lost." She pointed to the door, as if shooing away a useless pest. I walked past Emily, without looking back, leaving behind her cold stare and triumphant laughter. Seattle's rain slapped my face, soaking through my jacket, but I didn't feel the cold. As the door closed behind me, I wasn't angry. Just a faint smile crossed my lips. She thought she'd won. That $450 million was her ticket to freedom. But she didn't know it was only a burdensome legacy from a failed hotel chain in Miami. A truth I learned in Margaret's final days, when my former mother-in-law entrusted me with all her financial records. Emily's regret was only a matter of time. And it came quickly. A few days later, while I was resting at a small hotel and looking for a fresh start, her panicked voice rang through the phone. Leaving the Queen Anne house in the pouring rain, my mind still swirled with the memories of what had just happened. The woman I once trusted as my refuge after the storm turned out to be the one who set the trap. But to understand why I fell into that spiral, I have to tell the story from early. From the seemingly peaceful days with Sarah, my first wife. I met Sarah at a business seminar in downtown Seattle. I was a 35-year-old office equipment salesman, ambitious but clumsy in conversation. Sarah, with her warm smile and bright eyes, worked for a manufacturing company in Tacoma. She told a funny story about spilling coffee on a receipt, making me laugh for the first time in a stuffy conference room. We quickly bonded, dating at small restaurants along Puget Sound, strolling through the rain in Discovery Park. 2 years later, we married and moved into a small apartment in Capitol Hill. Life was simple but happy. We didn't have kids, as we both wanted to wait until our careers stabilized. I thought we had a lifetime ahead. But then the accident happened. Sarah was working at the Tacoma factory when a machine malfunctioned. She died instantly. I got the call from her manager on a rainy afternoon, his voice trembling over the phone. I don't remember how I drove to the hospital, only the numbness as I stood before Sarah's body, her face still serene as if sleeping. I collapsed. My world shattered under Seattle's endless rain. After the funeral, I received $600,000 from Sarah's insurance and pension. It was a large sum, but to me it was just a painful reminder of loss. Sarah's family in Spokane reached out, demanding a share, claiming they had a right as her parents. But I refused. I didn't want to part with the last thing tying me to her, though it left me feeling guilty. I knew they didn't need the money. They just wanted to capitalize. That decision left a scar, a sense of selfishness and loneliness. I returned to the Capitol Hill apartment, where everything reminded me of Sarah. The chair she loved to read in, the coffee mug she used, the faint scent of her perfume on the pillow. I tried keeping old habits, absent-mindedly setting 2 plates for breakfast, only to realize no one was across from me. I cooked Sarah's favorite dishes, grilled salmon, toast, but ate alone, staring out the window at the relentless Seattle rain. My sales job became my only escape. I threw myself into calls and contracts, trying to fill the void. But every night returning to the silent apartment, the pain resurfaced. I was no longer the man I used to be, just an empty shell wandering through memories. Friends urged me to open up, to find someone new to heal my wounds. But to me then, love seemed to have died with Sarah. She was my world, and losing her took the best part of me. I lived like an old clock, cycling through work, silent dinners, and heavy sleep. On weekends, I sat quietly in a corner of a Pike Place market cafe, watching people rush by, wondering if I could ever feel alive again. I didn't realize that my simmering loneliness made me an easy target, and then Emily came along. At the time, I didn't see a calculating woman. I only saw a hand extended at the right moment, a smile that made my stone-cold heart stir. Emily appeared like a flickering light in the darkness. I couldn't escape. I didn't know that behind her gentle care was cold calculation. I was drowning in grief, and she knew how to throw a lifeline, only to pull me down deeper. Now sitting in Seattle's gray rain, I understand why I let Emily into my life. Not out of love, but because I was trying to fill a bottomless void. She came when I was at my weakest, and I didn't have the strength to doubt or guard myself. Only looking back do I see clearly. Emily didn't bring new life, but a nightmare wrapped in a gentle disguise. To understand fully, I have to go back to the fateful moment, our first meeting. I met Emily at the office equipment sales company in downtown Seattle, where I still worked to forget Sarah's loss. Emily was a new colleague, 45, blonde, with a radiant smile and seemingly endless energy. One day, as I sorted papers in the office, she walked in and dropped a stack of receipts on the floor. What a terrible day, she laughed, picking them up with endearing clumsiness. I chuckled, the first time in years. She looked at me, asking, "What's so funny?" I replied, "You remind me of someone who used to drop things too." I meant Sarah, but I didn't say it. From then on, Emily talked to me more. She'd stop by my desk, sharing funny stories, like the time she misordered at a Pike Place market restaurant, making the whole table roar with laughter. I started looking forward to those moments. One evening, as we stayed late to finish a contract, I blurted out about Sarah, Tacoma accident, the unending pain. Emily listened without interrupting, her eyes glinting with empathy. "You're so strong," she said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Losing someone you love is the worst pain, but you keep going." Her words touched me, like a balm for my wounds. We started dating, evenings strolling in Gasworks Park, watching sunsets over Puget Sound, or dining at a small Belltown restaurant. Emily was thoughtful, remembering my favorite dishes, asking about work, even bringing coffee to the office when I was tired. I felt alive again, as if Sarah was smiling somewhere, approving of my new chance. But deep down, I wrestled with guilt. Was it right to love someone else? Was I betraying Sarah? Emily sensed my hesitation. One evening, at a Capitol Hill cafe, she took my hand and said, "We're not young anymore. At 45, no one wants to wait forever. Do you want to live alone for the rest of your life?" Her words hit my fear of falling back into the darkness after Sarah's death. She pushed for marriage, citing our need for stability. I hesitated, but her earnest eyes made me nod. "Okay, let's get married," I said, feeling both hopeful and uneasy. A colleague at the company, someone I barely knew, once gently warned, "She seems a bit rushed." "Are you sure?" I laughed it off, thinking he was jealous or just didn't understand. To me then, Emily was the only one who'd pulled me from the abyss. A year after our first meeting, we had a simple wedding in Seattle. Standing before her, seeing her smile like sunshine after rain, I believed I was stepping into a bright new chapter. I had no idea that behind her warm gaze was a chessboard already set, with me as the final pawn to be sacrificed. Looking back now, I see I entered that marriage with my eyes closed. Emily didn't choose me for love. She saw an easy mark, a widowed man, lost, desperate for connection. I was too trusting, too fragile to notice the small warning signs. When we first married, I thought I'd found an escape from the loneliness that engulfed me after Sarah's death. Emily then seemed like a faint light at the end of the tunnel. But in reality, I set the stage for the tragedy that followed. when she handed me the divorce papers, head held high, declaring, $450 million is enough. You're just an ATM now. I grasped the bitter truth. Everything I thought was happiness was an illusion built on her cunning calculations. To understand why it all crumbled so fast, I have to talk about the early days of our marriage. When I first met my mother-in-law, Margaret Hayes, the woman I believed would be part of the happy family, I tried to build with Emily. Not long after the wedding, Emily suggested we visit her mother, Margaret, in Seattle's Madison Park. I stepped into the grand yet cozy house, struck by its elegance. Margaret, though over 70 and frail from heart disease, exuded the sharpness of a once successful real estate entrepreneur. She greeted me with a firm handshake, her keen eyes studying me. "Sit down, I want to hear about you," she said, her voice both friendly and probing. I shared about my sales job, the tough years after losing Sam. She nodded, as if she understood the pain of loss. We talked for hours, from business to life. Margaret shared her entrepreneurial journey, from a small Seattle firm to major deals across the U.S., but what struck me most was her story about the failed Miami hotel chain. "I invested because I loved travel," she said, her voice lowering. "I wanted to create places that felt like home, but I miscalculated, risked too much. In the end, I had to borrow $450 million to save the project, but it still collapsed." She gave a faint smile, unregretful. "Failure teaches more than success, you know." I nodded, feeling a connection. She wasn't just my mother-in-law, but a mentor, inspiring me to face mistakes. Soon after, Emily suggested we move in with Margaret to care for her. I agreed, partly to be close to her, partly to build a family. We moved into a large Queen Anne house, supported by Margaret. Emily quit her sales job, saying she wanted to care for Mom and be a homemaker. I supported her, thinking she was sacrificing for family. "You focus on work. I'll handle the house," she said, smiling sweetly. I trusted her, as I once trusted that smile when we dated in Gasworks Park. The early months of marriage passed smoothly. Emily seemed attentive, cleaning the house, cooking simple meals, grilled salmon, salads, dishes I liked from our dating days. She spent time with Margaret, taking her to doctor's appointments, chatting in the living room. I felt relieved coming home after work, seeing Emily wipe down the kitchen counter and organize things. "Mom's doing better because of her," Margaret once told me, her eyes grateful. I felt proud, thinking I'd chosen the right person. Emily wasn't just a wife, but a devoted caregiver to her mother. Margaret and I grew close. On evenings when Emily was out shopping, I sat with her in the living room. Her sharp, experience-rich business stories captivated me. "Never let emotions override reason," she once said, her gaze hinting at something deeper. I smiled, nodding absently. Back then I thought I was living a perfect picture, right? I worked hard, brought money home. Emily handled the house and cared for her mom. I had no idea that seemingly trivial things, like her growing carelessness or vague spending, were the first signs of a looming tragedy. Only later, looking back, did I realize I'd been enchanted by an illusion. Emily wasn't as devoted as I thought. She wasn't building a home. She was scheming. She didn't care for her mother out of love, but for the inheritance she was certain she'd claim when Margaret passed. Back then, I didn't see the truth. I only saw a dutiful wife, a home filled with laughter, and an inspiring mother-in-law. The time living with Emily and Margaret in the old Queen Anne house in Seattle once made me think I'd truly regained a family. Peaceful mornings, birds chirping outside the window, and dinners with the three of us gathered, all made me believe the pain of losing Sarah was starting to fade. But that peace was just a still lake before a storm. When Emily suddenly presented the divorce papers, without explanation, and coldly mentioned the fortune she thought was within her grasp, I snapped awake. That moment, I realized the cracks in our marriage had been there for a long time. I just wasn't clear-headed enough to see them. To fully understand why it all fell apart, I have to go back to the beginning, when Emily entered my life like a miracle after my grief, but was actually a whirlwind that swept away everything I'd tried to build. After the first few months of marriage, Emily changed. She stopped cleaning the house as before. The kitchen counter was stained, trash piled up in the corner, and I often had to take it out myself after a tiring day at the sales company. "I'm busy with Mom," she said. But I saw her spend more time scrolling on her phone than with Margaret. The meals she used to cook, grilled salmon, salads, vanished, replaced by takeout from Belltown restaurants, delivered to the door. I didn't complain at first, thinking she was just stressed. But when restaurant bills stacked up on the table, I got irritated. "Can't you cook something simple?" I asked one evening, gently. Emily shrugged, giving a faint laugh. What do you want me to do? Mom's leaving $450 million. Why save? Her words stunned me. I remembered Margaret's story about the failed Miami hotels, the $450 million loan. But I never thought Emily would so shamelessly bank on her mother's fortune. I started noticing how she neglected Margaret. She rarely took her to the doctor, leaving it to the housekeeper. Times I saw Margaret sitting alone in the living room. Her eyes showed disappointment. One evening, when Emily was out shopping, she pulled me aside, her voice low. I'm sorry, son. Emily isn't as caring as you think. She used to squander family money, and I'm afraid she'll do it to you. She held my hand, her eyes full of worry. Be careful, I nodded, but my heart was in turmoil. I didn't want to believe Emily, who'd comforted me at Pike Place Market, was so irresponsible. Then one day, I found she'd spent $50,000 from our joint account. Checking the bank, I saw transactions for designer bags, jewelry, and an expensive coat from a downtown Seattle store. Rage flared. I waited for Emily to come home, holding the bank statement to confront her. You spent $50,000 without asking me. That was our savings, I shouted, my voice shaking. Emily curled her lip, unapologetic. So what? Mom's leaving $450 million. What's $50,000? You're so stingy. I clenched my fists, wanting to yell in her face, but remembering Margaret, I tried to stay calm. You had no right to spend my money like that, I said, voice icy. Emily scoffed. Your money. We're married. Forgot. Stop overreacting. That argument left an irreparable crack. I started thinking about divorce. Every time I looked at Emily, I saw only deceit, not the woman who'd held my hand in Gasworks Park. But I couldn't leave. Margaret was growing weaker, and I didn't want to leave her alone with Emily, who clearly didn't care. I recalled Margaret's words, don't let emotions override reason. I decided to endure, avoiding conflict, hoping things would improve, but I was wrong. Emily didn't change. She grew more careless. She spent recklessly, ignored her mother, neglected household chores, as if they weren't her responsibility. I started taking Margaret to doctor's appointments, myself, cooking her meals, cleaning rooms, all while juggling work, to keep our lives afloat. The once warm house on the hill became a suffocating cage. I slowly realized Emily never truly loved me, or valued what we had. What Emily didn't know, and what I only came to understand too late, was that the fortune she expected from her mother was just negative numbers, buried in failed Miami investments. Margaret had tried to hint at it, through veiled stories and warning glances, but I was too busy clinging to a crumbling marriage, too convinced things could be salvaged. If only I'd listened more closely, paid more attention, I might have prevented the worst from happening. Margaret passed quietly one rainy afternoon, after a heart attack at the hospital. I was by her side in her final moments, holding her frail hand, as she whispered with thin breaths, "You're a good man. Thank you for staying." Her eyes closed gently, as if entrusting something final. I was choked up, only able to squeeze her hand tightly, a wordless goodbye. The funeral was simple but dignified, held at a small church on the city's outskirts. I chose white flowers, her favorite hymn, and arranged every detail, not out of duty, but gratitude for the only person in Emily's family who'd treated me with genuine kindness. In stark contrast, Emily was like a stranger. While I busied myself with arrangements, she sat in the living room, eyes glued to her phone, fingers frantically checking bank details. "How much did Mom leave?" she asked, not bothering to look up. I stared at her for a moment, silent. Something inside me closed off. No more anger, no more disappointment, just emptiness. I stood, quietly stepped outside, and continued the unfinished tasks, as a way to say a final goodbye, not just to Margaret, but to the illusion of a family I'd tried to build. A few days after the funeral, after I'd signed the divorce papers and left the Queen Anne house, my phone rang. It was Emily. Her voice was frantic, almost screaming. "Why can't I access the money? The account has $450 million, but the bank says it's locked. Do you know anything about this?" I gave a faint smile, sitting in a modest hotel room, watching Seattle's rain outside the window. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, when the truth came to light. "The $450 million isn't an asset, Emily," I said, voice calm. "It's a mortgage loan for the failed Miami hotel chain. Your mom told me she borrowed that to save the project, but it didn't work. Her real account only has $80,000. Silence on the other end. Then Emily screamed, "No way. Mom was a millionaire." "You're lying," I sighed, recalling the times I helped Margaret organize her end-of-life plans. She'd shown me the documents, explained the debt clearly, as if ensuring I wouldn't be swept into Emily's delusions. "I'm not lying," I replied. "Have you checked? It's all debt. There's no $450 million for you to spend." Emily started crying, her voice trembling. "I spent all my savings. I thought I'd be rich. I bought stuff, paid off credit cards, because I thought Mom left a fortune." I wasn't surprised. Her carelessness, ordering takeout, buying designer bags, spending $50,000 from our joint account, had been clear for a while. Now she faced the consequences. "Please come back," she begged. "We can start over." I was wrong. But her voice only chilled me. I remembered how she'd flung the divorce papers, called me an ATM, kicked me out. "No, Emily," I said, voice icy. "You chose this path. Deal with it." I hung up without regret. Thanks to my final conversations with Margaret, I'd known the full truth. She didn't just share her Miami financial mistakes, but trusted me to handle most of her estate papers, as a way to protect me from her own daughter's greed. She knew Emily better than anyone. Arrogant, careless, always assuming everything was hers. She knew Emily wouldn't read the documents closely, would take the $450 million as a given. And she was right. Sitting in the small Seattle hotel room, watching rain fall by the window, I felt truly relieved, for the first time in years. No more Emily, no more lies, no more disdainful looks from someone who called me an ATM. Everything around me was now just a void, but a peaceful, tranquil void. I moved to a small apartment in Seattle's Fremont, far from Queen Anne's glitz and noise. The apartment was simple, with one bedroom, a desk, and a window opening to Puget Sound. Each morning I brewed coffee and sat by the window, listening to Seattle's rain patter outside. No more big house, no more Emily, just me in the quiet. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. My new life began with small but meaningful changes. I kept my office equipment sales job, though the industry was declining. Each call, each contract, however exhausting, gave me a new purpose. I no longer worked to escape loss, as I did after Sarah's death. Now I worked for myself, to rebuild my life, to reclaim the freedom I'd lost. In her will, Margaret left me $40,000. It wasn't much compared to the $450 million loan Emily imagined. But to me, it was a keepsake. I kept the money in a separate account, untouched, as a way to remember her. The sharp, resilient woman who taught me that failure is a lesson, not an end. Each time I saw the balance, I recalled her words, "Don't let emotions override reason." That money reminded me to live responsibly, not to be led by greed or naivety, as I was with Emily. The new life wasn't easy. Some nights, memories of Sarah or Margaret sitting alone in the Queen Anne living room flooded back, choking me up. But I didn't sink into the past. I learned to enjoy small things. A coffee at a familiar Fremont cafe, a rainy walk in Gasworks Park, or simply reading by the window. I realized happiness wasn't in the flashy things Emily chased, but in inner peace. Emily's carelessness and greed taught me a costly lesson. I'd been blind, letting her exploit me because of my grief over Sarah and my longing for a family. But now I understood no one could fill the void in my heart, but me. I set new goals, saving to start a small consulting firm, inspired by Margaret's entrepreneurial spirit. I didn't dream as big as she did, but I wanted to build something of my own, something lasting. Sitting in my Fremont apartment, watching raindrops fall, I felt ready. I was no longer the broken man stuck in Sarah's memories, or the naive husband, manipulated by Emily. I'd changed, grown and strengthened through lessons from Sarah, Margaret, and the painful experiences with Emily. Challenges lay ahead, but I'd face them with reason and a clear heart, no longer blind. My new life was just beginning, and I didn't expect peace to come after years of sorrow from Sarah's loss and Emily's betrayal. Leaving the Queen Anne house, I rediscovered myself, stepping out of darkness to find light. But my story doesn't end there. I heard about Emily and the consequences she faced for her greed and carelessness. It only solidified my resolve to live a different life, a full and truly my own life. Emily spiraled into a mental crisis after her failure, trying to return to sales by taking a job at a downtown Seattle company. But her arrogance and irresponsibility quickly surfaced, causing everything to collapse. An old colleague said Emily was often late, worked sloppily, and frequently argued with subordinates. She still thought she was a star, they mocked. But no one could tolerate that attitude for long. As a result, she was fired after a few months. With no savings left after splurging on luxuries, she had to take a part-time retail job in Bellevue, earning just enough to scrape by. From someone dreaming of a lavish life, Emily now faced a harsh reality, living frugally and enduring scornful looks from those around her. She tried contacting me, sending messages, calling, her voice full of regret. "I was wrong," she wrote in a long text. "Please give me a chance." But I didn't respond. I remembered her smirk, kicking me out of the Queen Anne house, calling me an ATM. I remembered Margaret, used by her own daughter as a tool for money. No, Emily didn't deserve my return. I deleted her messages, blocked her number, and moved on with my life. She had to take responsibility for her actions, as I'd learned to stand up after Sarah's death. Sitting in my Fremont apartment, watching Seattle rain fall outside the window, I felt relief wash over me. Rain, once a symbol of grief when I lost Sarah or left Queen Anne, now held new meaning. It reminded me that every storm passes, and light follows. I thought of Margaret, her lesson. Don't let emotions override reason. I thought of Sarah, her smile, and how she'd want me to live happily. And I thought of Emily, a vivid lesson in greed and carelessness. My life now is simple but meaningful. I still work in sales, saving every penny to start a small consulting firm, inspired by Margaret's entrepreneurial spirit. I walk in Gasworks Park, sip coffee at Pike Place Market, and read by my apartment window. These small things are enough to make me smile. I no longer chase flashy dreams or seek someone to fill a void. I've learned to love myself, to live true to my values. Looking at Seattle's rain and the shimmering Puget Sound in the distance, I know I'm ready for a new beginning. I don't hate Emily. She's just part of the past, a lesson for my growth. I thank Sarah and Margaret for giving me the strength to stand again. The road ahead is long, but this time I'll walk with confidence and clarity. The rain keeps falling, but I'm not afraid. I know light awaits, and I'll find it, step by step. The story after my Mills funeral: my wife inherited $450 million and evicted me. Next day, she called me in a panic, reflects profound lessons applicable to life in the U.S. today, where financial pressure, greed, and dishonesty often lead to poor decisions. In the story, Emily, my wife, was swept into a delusion of $450 million from her mother, Margaret, without verifying the truth, leading to reckless spending, betraying me, and ultimately falling into hardship, working part-time in Bellevue. In contrast, I, after enduring Sarah's loss and Emily's deception, found peace in a small Fremont apartment in Seattle, living simply and learning to value what truly matters. The lesson is verify information and live with financial responsibility, especially in the U.S., where consumer culture and credit debt can easily spiral out of control. Emily spent $50,000 from our joint account without asking, much like many Americans who fall into credit card debt from overspending. Instead, learn from Margaret, who, despite failing in Miami, taught me that failure is a lesson, not an end. Americans should plan finances carefully, verify investments or inheritances, rather than chasing get-rich-quick dreams. Moreover, I found happiness in simple things: coffee at Pike Place Market, walks in Gasworks, reminding us that in a U.S. society where success is often measured by wealth, true happiness comes from inner peace and honesty with oneself. Finally, ignoring Emily's regret taught us that valuing genuine relationships and leaving dishonest people behind is the way to live true to our values, even in a competitive society like the U.S. Subscribe to the channel to follow my journey of overcoming challenges and finding peace after the turmoil in Seattle. Thank you for joining me, and see you in the next video with new life lessons.